I've just finished Dark Souls 3 for the 7th time, and I still think it's the single best FromSoftware game ever made. Yeah, Elden Ring is bigger, Bloodborne is faster, Sekiro is more creative. But Dark Souls 3, it's the apex predator of the entire formula. It's been 10 years since this game dropped in April 2016, and we're sitting here in 2026, and it still feels better to play than most modern action RPGs. Over 10 million people agree. But here's what really blows my mind. The game that basically perfected Souls-like combat has been essentially abandoned by the studio. No updates in years, Elden Ring got a massive expansion, Dark Souls 3 got nothing. And somehow, despite that, the player base is still thriving. There's still invasions happening, there's still PvP at the high wall, people are still discovering secrets. So let me tell you why a 10-year-old game that FromSoftware left for dead is genuinely worth your time in 2026.
Dark Souls 3 is the third and final installment in the original Dark Souls trilogy. It released in March 2016 in Japan, April 2016 everywhere else. It shipped over 3 million copies in the first 2 months, becoming the fastest-selling game Bandai Namco had ever released. By May 2020, 4 years later, it had sold 10 million copies. As of now, in 2026, that number is almost certainly higher, though Bandai Namco stopped announcing sales figures after Elden Ring became their new darling. Here's the thing about Dark Souls 3. It exists in this interesting space where it's not the newest thing FromSoftware has made, but it also might be their most refined. Hidetaka Miyazaki himself directed this game after handing off Dark Souls 2 to someone else. He came back, looked at what Bloodborne had done, and basically said, we need to bring that fast-paced intensity to Dark Souls. The result is a game that takes everything that worked about the original Dark Souls, the interconnected world design, the environmental storytelling, the incredible boss fights, and cranks the speed up to 11. The player population in 2026 is genuinely surprising. On Steam alone, you've got anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 concurrent players any given time. If you factor in PlayStation and Xbox, we're talking tens of thousands of people still actively invading and co-oping. That's insane for a game that's a decade old with zero new content. The community is self-sustaining. It's like the game became this perfect thing, and FromSoftware just left it alone while everyone else keeps playing it. Sometimes that's better than constant updates. The story of Dark Souls 3 is complicated. You're an unkindled. Basically, you're a failed chosen one who is resurrected as ash in a graveyard because the world desperately needs a champion. The fire is fading, the world is collapsing, time is broken, and you've got to collect the ashes of 4 Lords of Cinder and carry them back to their thrones to link the first flame. On paper, that sounds pretty straightforward. In practice, it's woven through environment design, NPC questlines, item descriptions, and dialogue so oblique that you need a lore document just to understand what's happening. The game never explains the story. It shows it to you through a crumbling world. The world itself is this tragic, beautiful masterpiece. You journey from the Cemetery of Ash to the High Wall of Lothric, to the Cathedral of the Deep, to Faring Keep, to Erithil of the Boreal Valley. Each area feels different. Each area has its own ecosystem of enemies, its own visual identity, its own secrets. Unlike Elden Ring's open world, where you can see everything from horseback, Dark Souls 3 is vertical, interconnected, and claustrophobic. You're always moving forward through a collapsing world, and the design deliberately funnels you towards specific encounters. Ilex Gundyr, your first boss, isn't just a tutorial. He's literally a judge testing whether you're worthy. Champion Gundyr appears later, and the implication is that you're fighting him across different timelines, or that he's a version of himself from a past cycle. The lore suggests that multiple worlds are colliding, that time is broken, and that you might be erasing other people's chances at success just by existing. This is FromSoftware's specialty. The story isn't a narrative they tell you, it's a puzzle you have to solve. And if you don't care about that puzzle, the game is still just a well-designed action-adventure about fighting monsters and stealing their souls. Both approaches are valid.
Alright, let's talk about what makes Dark Souls 3 actually fun to play, because this is where the game separates itself from a lot of pretenders. The fundamental loop is this. You go through an area,
You die to an enemy you didn't expect. You learn that enemy's pattern, you adapt, and you succeed. The stamina management is tight. One great sword swing costs maybe 30-40% of your stamina, so you can't just spam attacks forever. You've got to plan your offensive windows. You've got to know when to dodge, when to attack, when to back off and regenerate stamina. The combat is built on this beautiful principle where you and the enemies follow roughly the same rules. There's obviously some exploitation. Enemies can be stun-locked, infinite stamina doesn't exist for you, but seems to for certain bosses. But the baseline is that you're both governed by poise, stamina, and attack animations. This creates this rhythm to fights, where it's about reading your opponent and timing your counters. Fast weapons, you trade hits constantly, but you can get more hits in. Heavy weapons, you hit like a truck, but commit to long recovery animations. It's rock, paper, scissors, but with swords. The magic system is less exciting. Spellcasting in Dark Souls 3 has never been nearly as fun as Dark Souls 1, where buffs were simple and powerful. In DS3, spells feel like a resource you're managing. You've got a limited focus points bar. Casting spells drains it. You either equip talismans and staves to boost spell damage, or you just use spells as utility. Some people build around it, most people ignore it entirely. That's fine. The game lets you beat it with literally any build. Full strength, pure dex, pyromancy, miracle, magic. The fact that heavy weapons are actually viable and people use them proves the game's balance is broad enough for creativity. The poise system is controversial. FromSoftware basically said, poise doesn't work like it did in Dark Souls 1. Instead, hyper armor frames mean that when you're swinging certain weapons, particularly heavy ones, you can't be stun-locked out of your attack. This caused a lot of forum arguments, but honestly, by 2026, people have figured it out. The system works. It's just different. Here's the undeniable truth. Dark Souls 3 has some of the best boss fights ever designed. I'm not exaggerating. The Nameless King, Champion Gundyr, Sister Fried, Slave Knight Gale, Idax Gundyr. These fights are genuinely incredible pieces of game design. The Nameless King is maybe the most difficult base game boss FromSoftware ever made. It's a two-phase fight where you're battling this god and his dragon. The first phase is basically a DPS check where you're trying to topple the dragon. The second phase is where the actual fight begins. He's relentless. His attacks have deceptive range. His combos will destroy you if you're not careful. The satisfaction of finally beating him? Unmatched. Sister Fried in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC is a three-phase fight that's pure nightmare fuel. Just when you think you've beaten her, Father Ariandel joins the fight. Then, plot twist, she gets corrupted and comes back for a final round. It's intense, emotional, and one of the hardest fights in any FromSoftware game. Slave Knight Gale from the Ringed City DLC is the ending fight to the entire Dark Souls trilogy. It's a massive arena with a mad knight who's been consuming souls and going insane. The fight is fast-paced, the arena is huge, the music is absolutely incredible, and the lore implications are staggering. It's basically FromSoftware saying goodbye to the Dark Souls franchise, and it's perfect. Now, is the difficulty fair? Mostly. Some fights are genuinely unfair. Some attacks are ambiguous about whether they'll hit you. Some arena hazards kill you in ways that feel cheap. But the difficulty also teaches you. You die, you figure out what killed you, you get better at reacting to it. That iterative learning loop is the entire point of the game. Some people hate it. Some people structure their entire gaming life around it. Both responses are legitimate. Dark Souls 3 has this unique multiplayer system where it's built into the single-player game. You can summon other players to help you with boss fights. You can invade other players' worlds to ruin their day. You can be summoned to duels. None of this requires matchmaking menus. You place a summon sign, you wait, someone summons you, you're in their world. The PvP scene is wild. There are dedicated areas, the High Wall of Lothric, Anne Orlando, the Ringed City, where people congregate to duel or invade. There's honor-based culture, covenant systems that reward you for invading or being invaded, and enough variety in builds that you never know what you're going to face. Now, in 2026, the online infrastructure is held together by duct tape and prayer. The game uses peer-to-peer connections, which means lag is constant. You'll backstab someone and they'll backflip 3 feet away but still get hit. You'll roll away from an attack that visually didn't touch you. This is the game's biggest technical problem. It's not FromSoftware's fault entirely. Peer-to-peer was a reasonable choice in 2016, but it hasn't aged well. The invasion system is controversial. If you're in someone's world, they're usually at a disadvantage. They're often trying to progress through content, and you're specifically there to kill them. Some people love invading, some people hate being invaded. The game caters to both by letting you avoid it if you don't use certain items, but there's something about the invasions that just adds to the atmosphere. It's this constant threat that makes the game feel alive. Visually, Dark Souls 3 holds up remarkably well in 2026. The art direction is immaculate. Even though the graphics aren't cutting edge anymore, the character design, architecture, and environmental storytelling make the game feel timeless. The Cathedral of the Deep, Anor Londo, the Ringed City, these are locations that will stay with you. On PC with high-end hardware, you can push the game to beautiful settings. There are community shader mods that add depth of field and ambient occlusion. There's a graphics overhaul called something like the Remastered Dark Souls 3 graphics mod that makes it look almost as good as Elden Ring. It's genuinely impressive what the modding community has done. On console, the PS5 and Xbox Series X run the game at 60 FPS, with a resolution somewhere between 1440p and 1800p, which is totally fine. The game was built to run at those specs, so performance is rock solid. There's no complaints here. The biggest technical issue is the netcode. In 2022, FromSoftware briefly shut down Dark Souls 3 servers due to a security vulnerability. They brought them back later that year after patching the exploit, but the incident highlighted just how old this infrastructure is. The game is running on netcode from 2016. It works, but it's finicky. One more thing. The game has no DLC since 2017. Both DLC packs came out ages ago. The base game alone is about 40-50 hours. Add the DLC and you're looking at 60-70 hours. For a 25-20 euro game, that's outstanding value. Dark Souls 3 got 2 DLC packs, both of which are genuinely excellent. Ashes of Ariandel released in October 2016 and is the shorter of the two. You journey into a frozen painting world called the Painted World of Ariandel. It's a 2-3 hour experience with some incredible new weapons, a new PvP arena, and Sister Freed, arguably the hardest optional boss in the game. The DLC is relatively linear, which is a departure from the base game's interconnected design. Some people find it disappointing for being short. I think it's a perfect side story that doesn't overstay its welcome. The Ringed City, released in March 2017, is the proper finale. It's longer, more expansive, and structurally more ambitious. You journey through the Dreg Heap, this surreal tower of collapsing civilizations, and eventually reach the Ringed City itself. The bosses are harder, the lore implications are staggering, and the final boss, Slave Nightgale, is basically FromSoftware's goodbye to Dark Souls as a series. Both DLCs together cost around 20-25 euro, but if you buy them separately, it's £15 each. They're absolutely worth it if you enjoy the base game. If you don't like Dark Souls 3 combat, the DLC won't change your mind. But if you love the game, the DLC extends it beautifully. Is Dark Souls 3 worth playing in 2026? Absolutely. It's one of the best action RPGs ever made. The boss fights are incredible. The world design is masterful. The combat is responsive and fair. The multiplayer adds this element of unpredictability. And it's been 10 years and it still feels fresh. If you're thinking about buying it, do it. It's constantly on sale for 15-20 euro. That's maybe 2 hours of playtime per pound, and you're getting 60 plus hours of content. It's a no-brainer. The only reasons not to play it are you absolutely hate difficult games or you can't deal with latency issues in PvP. If neither of those applies, there's genuinely no reason to skip Dark Souls 3. In 2026, sitting here a decade after release, Dark Souls 3 remains the gold standard for how to make a difficult game that's still fair, how to design a world that tells a story without exposition, and how to create boss fights that are genuinely memorable. Elden Ring took the foundation Dark Souls 3 built and made something bigger, but Dark Souls 3 is the foundation. It's the apex predator. It's the game that said this is the formula, and everything else since has been either a variation or an evolution of that formula. Thanks for watching. If you're planning to jump into Lothric Countdown, let me know in the comments which build you're thinking of. Me? I'm Team Quality Build forever. Like the video if you somehow haven't played Dark Souls 3 yet, subscribe for more games that will destroy your will to live, and I'll see you in the next one.